desire what it takes to be awarded as the best in the business, here is your chance to apply. Head on over to our website, download the form and apply. If you face any troubles when applying or feel the need to get in touch with us directly, email us, call us, tweet at me directly at Sunanda_J or join our Facebook group.
Hello and welcome you with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, ET Now's daily platform for the MSME space. We've recognized the need for a platform that can take in all of the queries from our MSME viewers, and ET Now's Leaders of Tomorrow is in response to that. We talk to all the experts from different industries, and today I'm in conversation with an expert from the hospitality space, Amrita Nair. She's the joint MD and CEO of Ayana Hotels and Resorts. Thank you very much for speaking with us. So let me start this conversation off by asking you to tell us what changes really you've seen in the hospitality industry while your brand has been in existence for about a year and a half, 2 years now. Your family has been involved in hospitality for very long now. What changes have you seen in the domestic hospitality industry?
Well, I think the biggest disruptor for us really has been in the distribution space. So the fundamentals of the business has pretty much stayed the same, right? It's room and board, and so it's still about a great sleep experience, a good shower. So those are the fundamentals that you can't necessarily change, and that stayed. What's changed is the distribution space, and I think the role that technology is playing from a user experience perspective. So everything from the time they make that decision, the research that's going in, the amount of information that's available, the booking systems. So I think technology has played a huge role in terms of offering multiple platforms in which people can engage. With Ayana, which is a relatively new brand, it's been 18 months since we signed the joint venture. We brought about this concept called Hospitality 2.0, and the idea was to really embrace that and bring in technology. But at Ayana, our take really is that the technology doesn't necessarily need to replace human interaction, but it's there to enhance it. So we're doing multiple things on the tech front to just enhance that experience. So whether it's the way we engage with a guest, their engagement with the brand before they're on property, or even in terms of how we get feedback from them while they're on site. I think the only way to move ahead is to embrace the change.
Okay. Let me pick up on one of the things that you said, and you were talking about technology.
Yes.
How has technology really changed the way the industry has functioned over the last decade? Has technology been the biggest disruptor as far as the hospitality industry is concerned? And do you expect that it will be the biggest disruptor going forward? And let's maybe talk about a 5 to 10 year horizon.
No, I'd certainly say so. And I think a lot of the big consolidation that you see in terms of the larger hospitality companies like Marriott and Starwood and all the M&As have primarily been prompted by the competition that the industry is facing from the online travel agent, and I think they're a force to reckon with, and this is one way of combining inventories in order to be large enough to be able to go back and negotiate better. So I think it's been a sort of wake up call to the industry also to find a way to take that power back. So certainly it's here to stay. What we're doing differently, I suppose, is trying to, and I think that's relevant to most new businesses, right? So I think you need to embrace technology and find something unique that you can do to differentiate yourself from the competition. So we're a relatively new player on the block. So if we're going to go up against the big boys, I think we need to create value, laterally, and technology hopefully will help us do that.
Okay. I would presume that the domestic hospitality industry is very fragmented. What advice do you have for our viewers, the small hospitality players,
Yes.
Say the players who have single units, about how they can possibly use technology? Because I assume that this technology is coming at a cost, and it's
Yes.
not something that a small player can necessarily afford. What advice would you have?
Well, I think the brilliance of it all is the fact that it levels the playing field, right? So essentially, the benefit to an independent hotel owner who has a single unit would really be that they're able to access a platform that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise be able to get access to. So I think in that sense, from a branding and a positioning play, it certainly makes sense to use that platform to gain a presence. I mean, I think the beauty about India is that you've got a whole variety in terms of experiences that you can offer. I mean, we entered the market with a single resort in Kerala, but we've realized that we were starting out with a 33-room villa project in Munnar, which is up in the plantations. But Kerala has to offer, there's a wellness angle, there's the backwaters, there's beaches, there's religious tourism. So I think in that sense, my advice would be to find a niche and specialize. I think that's something, if you're even if you're starting out small, finding a niche and owning that space is what's important, rather than being a generalist.
Okay. Do you see a lot of consolidation necessarily in the hospitality industry? As the government is, aggressively pushing tourism,
Yes.
do you see consolidation happening at the lower end of the market?
I mean, you do see a lot of, I haven't read of recent transactions in terms of large portfolios coming available, but I think there's certainly a huge amount of single assets that are on the market. So I think that there's certainly potential there for transactions. Right. In my space, which is more on the management side, because Ayana is completely asset light. So we come on board as the operator as opposed to looking at owning the real estate. What we've seen there is that there've been a handful of sort of regional players that could potentially be targets for acquisition. So there's certainly interest there too, because it's a faster way to grow. So someone entering the India market, that would certainly be of interest, because it would add to your portfolio fairly quickly.
Okay. I want to talk about what you see in terms of, say, the biggest challenges really as far as the hospitality industry in India is concerned. What have been maybe one or two of the biggest challenges, and therefore what advice would you have for our viewers in terms of how to possibly meet those and overcome those?
I think the hospitality, from a real estate perspective, from a hotel owner who's looking at building from scratch, so greenfield projects, the development phase, I would say, would be the most challenging. I mean, we all know it's a long-term game, but I think access to financing is the key concern. So the cost of capital is a key concern. You look at what a typical hotel project would be like in terms of international standards. You're talking about less than land being less than 20 to 30% of the entire cost. In India, it's easily as much as 50. So I think it's critical. It makes a huge difference. I think being able to have access to capital for development. I think for someone who's in my case, trying to start out and create something new in terms of a management company, it was important to find a player who so I went the strategic route and found a partner and an investor who had the same long-term vision as I did, and I think just sharing the same values helps. So it certainly, when you're starting out, it helps to have patient capital as well. So so that box was certainly checked, but I think it was also important for me to find someone who shared the same passion. So so Sheikh Faisal, who's based out of Qatar, owns about 7 hotels in Qatar and about 28 others across the globe. So he shares both the owner's perspective, but just a general interest in the industry, right? So, so I think it takes that pressure off as the partner that's managing the business, to be able to be conscious of the fact that they're here to stay. So.
Okay, so you're saying essentially it is real estate, and the second would be finance in terms of the challenges for the hospitality industry.
That's right.
I want to discuss each of those. Let's talk about land.
Okay.
And you're saying that in India, for example, the cost could be as high as 50% compared to say 20 to 30% globally.
Yes.
Why is that? Is that because of the regulatory framework that exists in India right now? And what advice then would you have for MSMEs in terms of overcoming these high cost of land?
I think with land prices it varies also, right? So it's location specific, but at the same time, I think it's just where your real estate prices are at. But to answer your question about the regulatory framework, to give you an example in terms of benchmarking, I used to work in Singapore as a consultant in the hotel space, and you would see hotels coming up within 24 months. You've got a single window for clearance, a single authority. So in Singapore's case, it was the STB that you'd go to for all your approvals, and I believe it was something like 18 approvals. In India, it's possibly over 108. So so I think the licensing and the approvals and that side of it is certainly a key challenge, but it's a fact of life, and I think in that sense you just need to be prepared. And I suppose the other advice that I would have to give is that you factor that in and be conscious of. So especially in the development phase of the cycle, you need to build in delays in the project. The fact that it does take you could potentially lose a year waiting for approval. So and especially when you're dealing with foreign capital or strategic investors, being conscious of those and factoring that into your timelines and your business plan is critical, because it's a fact of life, unfortunately.
Amrita, do hold that thought. Let's take a very quick break, but much more on the other side. We'll continue talking about family-owned and run businesses and takeaways from young entrepreneurs. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. I'm in conversation with Amrita Nair, talking about advice for young entrepreneurs, talking about the do's and don'ts for you, the entrepreneur in the hospitality industry. Let's talk about finance, which is the other concern you said that most players in the domestic hospitality industry face. What advice do you have for our viewers? How easy or difficult is it for an MSME who's looking to raise funds in this space? And what advice would you have in terms of, say, approaching banks, or is VC or private equity funding easier in this space?
Well, I chose to go the private equity route only because I was looking for a strategic investor and a partner. Now, in my particular case, it's not a real estate business. It's a management business, and so it was important also to get traction very early, in the early stage, but also build for that burn. What we were able to do was enter the market very quickly. So I had a JV partner who brought in hotel assets that they owned. So we were able to enter Qatar and Saudi Arabia within the first 12 months of setting up the joint venture. In India, we've now got 6 management contracts signed, and of the 6, we've already hit the ground in terms of construction on 2 sites. So we've got about 1,000 rooms under construction, and it's been 18 months. So I think I was conscious of the nature of the partnership also, and what I was looking for in terms of not just capital, but also all the other sort of value adds that partner could bring to the table.
Okay, so would you say that it's better for small businesses and entrepreneurs who are in this space to perhaps approach banks, given what we're seeing in terms of the NPA situation right now? Or would you think it's better if they looked at private equity or VC funding, because the economy has opened up so much more, the government is actively pushing FDI? What would you suggest?
I mean, my recommendation, I'd like to stick with the space that I'm familiar with, only because it's worked for me. But my advice would be to be also clear of what your investors' objectives are. So right from the start, we were very clear about in terms of the growth that we were, how ambitious we were going to be, the risk we were willing to take. And I think at the end of the day, with a lot of the private equity firms, you're talking about a 5 to 7 year time frame. So at the end of the day, there has to be a clear exit, and it helps to plan for that from day one. And so I think just being conscious of what your partner's objectives are also, and I think at the end of the day, every investor is looking for yield, and that's what it comes down to.
Okay. When you were talking about the challenges in the industry, we were talking about government regulation right now. You said nearly 108 approvals are required for the hospitality industry. If there's one piece of regulation that you think needs to change to make it easier to start a business in this industry in India, what would it be?
Well, I think there's certainly the intention to streamline the process. And I think they're all on the table. It's a matter of it all coming to a close. But a single window clearance, I think that would be the one-stop solution that would make a lot of our lives easier.
Okay. All right, so here's hoping that we do see that single window clearance coming in for the industry. Well, let's talk about family run and owned and managed businesses. And I'm sure that you've closely observed how, your family's business has been run over the years. A lot of our MSMEs, a majority of them are family run businesses. And they write to us to say, what should we keep in mind when you're talking about family run businesses? How do you plan for succession planning? Let's start by talking about maybe one or two do's and don'ts that you think should be top priority for MSME entrepreneurs who are part of family run and owned businesses.
So in my particular case, I was with the family business and then chose to start an enterprise of my own. So I knew I do have to. So I'm part of the Nair family, which is a promoter group of the Leela. So I think that will always remain a part of my legacy and inspiration to a large extent. But I was very clear in the fact that I wanted to create something of my own that was, and even from a business model perspective, was very different. But that said, I am a third generation hotelier, and I think in that, it certainly helped open doors. So I think but at the same time, I had to be conscious of the fact that, my last name and my legacy would only get me, it may make it easier to initiate a discussion with, a potential hotel owner or a developer. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to you. So I think legacy would only take you that far.
A lot of experts who come on our show say that succession planning in India perhaps doesn't take into account that the second generation may not necessarily want to be involved in the business. Do you think there's enough understanding of succession planning in India?
Well, I think Indian businesses, I mean, at least the older, you see with the older generation have a very clear idea of, in terms of how they see their businesses going forward, only because they're driven by the idea of creating a legacy. So I think that's inherent to a lot of Indian family businesses. And you see fourth and fifth generation entrepreneurs. So I think that maybe it's a little different from the West, in the sense that it's in terms of having formal family offices and in terms of governance processes in place that are documented. But I think it's still quite structured in India, maybe just not documented.
Okay, so it's definitely essential and helpful, especially for the second generation, to have a 360-degree view, but your recommendation is that a specialization is a must.
Yes.
As we're winding down this conversation, Amrita, I would like to ask you if there is one piece of advice that you would have for young entrepreneurs like yourself, what would it be?
Never give in. So it was Hillary Clinton's first campaign speech, and she talked about how her mother, the one advice that her mother gave her was to never back down to bullies or barriers. I think that's very sound advice, and it's from a mother to her daughter, and it's the advice I would give to any other woman trying to start out and set out in a new business, that never give in. I think there's it's interesting what the last 15 months has taught me is that every time you come up when you're challenged with something that you didn't plan for, rather than look at the negative side of it, look at it as an opportunity, because what I've realized is that it opens up so many other doors. As long as you're clear in terms of where you want to be, maybe the route changes, and you have to be prepared for that, but never give up.
Amrita, thank you very much for speaking with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. Do remember, we love hearing from you. If you have any commentary, any feedback, any questions, you can write into us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can tweet me directly. The hashtag is Sunanda_J, or you can use the hashtag LOT on Twitter. You can reach us also on that number that you see on your screens. Do stay tuned, there's much more coming up, and do remember that we take all of your queries for our panel of experts, so do write into us. Thanks for watching.
If you feel you have what it takes to be awarded as the best in the business, here is your chance to apply. Head on over to our website, download the form and apply. If you face any troubles when applying or feel the need to get in touch with us directly, email us, call us, tweet at me directly at Sunanda_J, or join our Facebook group.